In the world of television, ratings are king. If people watch, the show stays. Simple, right? Think again. Sometimes a show can have millions of fans, high ratings, and critical acclaim, and still find itself on the chopping block because of corporate mergers, wrong demographics, and even real-life natural disasters. So, in this video, we're looking at the sci-fi shows canceled for the wildest, most frustrating, and straight-up bizarre reasons. We're talking about the corporate chess moves and cosmic bad luck that ended some of the best and strangest visions of the future. Star Trek: The Next Generation. Let's kick things off with a show that was canceled because it was too successful for its own good. In 1994, Star Trek: The Next Generation wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural powerhouse. So why on earth would Paramount pull the plug on their own goldmine? The answer? To force the cast onto the big screen. By the early 90s, the original Star Trek cast had been carrying the movie franchise for 6 films, and their salary demands were skyrocketing. Paramount saw the writing on the wall. The legacy cast was hitting a ceiling of profitability. Meanwhile, the TNG crew was at the absolute height of their TV popularity. Fans were obsessed with Picard, Data, and Worf, and Paramount realized they had a fresher and, more importantly, significantly more cost-effective cast sitting right there on the small screen. So instead of waiting for TNG to naturally decline in ratings, they decided to strike while the iron was hot. They killed the show at its peak specifically to drive the audience into movie theaters. They hoped that they could reboot the movie franchise's appeal for another decade without the astronomical salary overhead of the original crew. And it worked, but at the cost of what could have easily been 10 seasons of legendary television. Doctor Who. Now, imagine being such a staple of British culture that you run for 26 years only to have an executive decide you're cringe. That's what happened to Doctor Who in 1989. The BBC brass at the time openly disliked the show. They felt that the low-budget effects and eccentric stories were outdated and embarrassing for a modern network. So, even though ratings were actually higher than the previous season, Doctor Who was put on what they called a permanent hiatus. It wasn't canceled because people stopped watching, it was canceled because the execs didn't want to be the network that makes that weird kids show. Thankfully, the Doctor has a habit of coming back from the dead. 16 years later, Russell T Davies revived the series and proved to the world and the skeptics just how cool a man in a blue box could really be. Superman and Lois. Fast forward to the modern era, where shows still get the axe for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with quality. Superman and Lois was arguably the best reviewed DC show in years. It had heart, cinematic VFX, and a deeply loyal audience. But it ran into 2 massive corporate brick walls. First, Nexstar. The CW network was sold to the giant media conglomerate that wanted to pivot away from expensive, scripted superhero content in favor of cheap reality TV and sports. But the real kicker? Superman Legacy. When James Gunn took over DC Studios, he wanted a clean slate for his new cinematic universe, starting with his Superman film. And Warner Brothers executives were right there with him. They also didn't want a competing Superman on the small screen while they were trying to launch a multi-billion-dollar movie reboot. So, despite its success, Superman and Lois was canceled to make way for the Superman movie. Counterpart. It's one thing to be canceled for low ratings, but what about being canceled for having the wrong kind of fans? Take Counterpart. It was a critically acclaimed, high-concept spy thriller starring the legendary J.K. Simmons as 2 different versions of himself in parallel dimensions. It was smart, tense, and apparently too male. At the time, Starz was attempting a massive brand pivot to attract more female viewers. So, even though Counterpart was a masterpiece, the network executives decided it didn't fit their new target demographic. They essentially let a brilliant story die because the men were enjoying it. The irony? Years earlier, Tower Prep had the exact opposite problem. This live-action mystery on Cartoon Network about a school for gifted kids was a massive hit, but specifically with girls. And since Cartoon Network's advertising partners back then were almost exclusively toy companies looking to sell to boys, the network saw the show's success with girls as a failure. They pulled the plug because the audience didn't match the commercials. So it turns out that in the cold world of television, sometimes having the wrong fans is actually worse than having no fans at all. Invasion. And in some cases, the universe itself seems to conspire against a show. In 2005, ABC was looking for a companion to their mega hit, Lost. They put their hopes on Invasion, a high-budget, eerie thriller about water-based aliens infiltrating a Florida town in the wake of a massive hurricane. But then, Hurricane Katrina hit. The real-world devastation was so horrific that the show's imagery suddenly felt deeply uncomfortable for a grieving nation. ABC scrambled. They pulled all hurricane-themed marketing and tried to rebrand it as a generic alien invasion show. But the momentum was gone. A high-potential series was essentially washed away by the timing of Mother Nature. And that's not the only way the world intervenes. Global events have a habit of killing safe bets. The 2007 writers' strike claimed casualties like the time-travel gem Journeyman and the Bionic Woman reboot. And more recently, the pandemic took down The Society on Netflix, while the 2023 writers' strikes claimed Amazon's The Peripheral. Crusade. If you want to see a creator's soul leave their body, look no further than the production of Crusade. After TNT discovered that their core audience wasn't watching Babylon 5, and conversely, that Babylon 5 fans weren't sticking around for other TNT shows, they realized ordering a Babylon 5 spin-off was a massive mistake. But instead of just canceling it, TNT reportedly did everything they could to sabotage the show and get out of their contract. The interference became legendary. The network demanded more sex and violence, while the creator, J. Michael Straczynski, fought to keep it a serious sci-fi drama. The result? A disjointed mess filled with continuity errors that was effectively dead before the first episode even aired. TNT spent millions on a show they had already decided to kill. And Sliders suffered a similarly painful death. Fox kept interfering, demanding Movie of the Week plots and Monster of the Week tropes instead of the show's established lore. Eventually, the creator walked away, the cast was systematically replaced, and the show became unrecognizable. It wasn't canceled because the original idea was bad, it was canceled because the network turned it into a Frankenstein's monster that even the die-hard fans couldn't recognize anymore. Mutant X. And sometimes the show itself is doing just fine, but the company making it literally disappears. That's the bizarre story of Mutant X. On the surface, the show was a solid hit in syndication, but behind the scenes, it was born into a legal nightmare. First, Fox sued Marvel and the show's production companies, claiming Mutant X was an unauthorized ripoff of X-Men. Because of the lawsuit, the show had to be incredibly careful about how they even used the word mutant. They were legally walking on eggshells just to stay on the air. But the final nail in the coffin wasn't a courtroom battle, it was a corporate collapse. One of the show's primary production companies, Fireworks Entertainment, was suddenly dismantled. Without a parent company left to sign the checks, Mutant X simply ceased to exist, leaving fans stranded on a massive cliffhanger that will never be resolved. And the sci-fi series Andromeda was also a victim of the Fireworks Entertainment fallout. It lost its production backbone at the worst possible time, proving that in Hollywood, your show is only as strong as the company standing behind it. Person of interest. This next one might be the most Hollywood reason on the list. Person of Interest was a massive hit for CBS. It had the ratings, the critical acclaim, and a huge fan base. But there was a catch. CBS didn't own it. Warner Brothers did. In the modern era of television, networks don't just care about the commercials you see during the broadcast. They make their real money through long-term streaming rights and international sales. So, since CBS was only getting the first-run ad revenue, they realized it was more profitable to air a lower-rated show that they owned fully than a massive hit they had to share. It's a cold-blooded reality. If the network can't keep 100% of the pie, they'd rather let the pie rot. And Dark Matter faced the exact same fate on Sci-Fi. Despite being one of the network's most consistent performers and having a dedicated following, Sci-Fi didn't own the show. When it came time to renew, they swung the axe. Not because of the quality, but because of the contract. The Sarah Jane Adventures. We also have to mention the heavy stuff, because there are times when a show is so tied to a single person that it simply cannot survive without them. The Sarah Jane Adventures was a beloved Doctor Who spin-off that was right in the middle of its 5th season when the legendary Elizabeth Sladen suddenly passed away. For the fans and the creators, there was no recasting Sarah Jane Smith. She was the heart of that show. So production halted immediately, and the show ended out of pure, deep-seated respect for the actress. This echoed a tragedy from decades earlier, when the original Adventures of Superman came to a sudden end following the tragic and mysterious death of George Reeves. In that era, the lead actor didn't just play the character, they were the show. And without him, the series was over. Terra Nova. Finally, we have the show that was simply too expensive to live. Terra Nova was Steven Spielberg's massive swing at bringing Jurassic Park to the small screen. It had everything: time travel, a prehistoric frontier, and of course, massive CGI dinosaurs. But the price tag was staggering. It cost roughly $4 million per episode to produce. In 2011, that was a jaw-dropping number. To keep a show like that alive, it couldn't just be a hit, it needed to be a Super Bowl-level event every single week. And while the ratings were actually decent, they were nowhere near $4 million per episode good. The math simply stopped working, and the astronomical price tag made it impossible for Fox to justify a second season. So there you have it, a graveyard of sci-fi shows that didn't end because nobody watched them. Are there any other sci-fi shows that got axed for strange reasons we forgot to mention? And which of these cancellations hurt you the most? Let us know in the comments. For even more TV show-related content, check out tvshowpilot.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the TV Show Pilot YouTube channel for more journeys into the weird world of entertainment.